Welcome to the 20th episode of Brace for Impact, covering all things Impact Wrestling. Live from No Cell Studios, I'm the AXS Tavern, ACefieldretro, and joined on this Thursday evening with that mullet.mania himself. What's up, Colton Jesse?
What's going on, dude? Man, just wrapping up a pretty excellent week for wrestling. I was at Dynamite last night. They were here in Louisville, so that was great to be in person for, and just kind of savoring our last few episodes that we have as the under the banner that is Impact Wrestling before we make the switch to TNA.
And as we discussed last week, it seemed like they're going out with a whimper. They are punting until January, and we're kind of going through the motions here. We did the recap show of Bound for Glory where they showed a lot of the highlights and full matches from the pay-per-view, and it was definitely, it brought some new eyes to the product. And then you were looking at this show, which was Colton, a glorified house show. And of course, the UK Invasion Tour is something we were looking forward to, expanding the market, being in Glasgow, Scotland. Out of order for sure, because this was taped after these Fallout tapings in Cicero Stadium. So a little bit confusing, and we'll definitely break down a lot of the stuff. But again, it feels like they are just biding time until January comes where the TNA rebrand takes over.
Yeah, man, we were talking off air, and I think you said it perfectly when you said this is kind of the definition of punting until January. I was going to try to give them benefit of the doubt last week with doing just kind of the recap show and say, maybe it had to do with just not getting footage edited in time to get on the plane and go do the shows over in the UK. But this week too, I mean, we'll get to it when we break down the card. But this show, even though it was a house show, it kind of felt like watching a house show, and like almost like a home video of a house show. Even the frame rate was different, which I know is the UK has a different frame rate that we have in the US. It's 25 versus 30. So I mean, if they filmed it in 25 frames per second and then played it on and then broadcast it out on devices that are built for 30, it's gonna look strange. It was just all around, and this kind of felt like a recap show or a highlight reel in its own way, because we kept cutting back to stand-ups of Ray Walt and Hannafin just kind of pitching to these matches. So yeah, just kind of an odd feel, man. They're I think they've got all their eggs in the basket for the rebrand, and we're just kind of putting content to get it out there. I was also really caught off guard tonight with the fact that it was the GLASGOW tapings. I was expecting to see the fallout from Chicago, but it sounds like we're getting that later down the line.
Yeah, I think we're going to be back in Chicago next week. They said it when they went off the air, and it seems like we're going to get Alexander versus Will Ospreay, which we thought we were going to get this week. And we're also going to get Alex Shelley versus John Gresham. And of course, we'll cover it in the news with Alex Shelley getting hurt. And this might be, it's never a good time to get hurt, but this might be the best time because of how, they got some time off between now and whenever these tapings are done. As we mentioned last week, taping in bulk, they have a Thanksgiving match, theme match. So that might be definitely a barometer of how far they're going out. So at the very least, we'll be at the end of November. And like we said, I mean, looking at all the news and all the positive vibes that were coming out of the TNA rebrand, and everyone was talking about it, and they've been at the forefront of the news for the first time in quite some time. I feel like we are talking about them in a positive light. And for the longest time, they were humming under the surface where there was a lack of conversation, not bad conversation, but there was none. And now that the TNA rebrand happened, it brought a lot of conversation to the table, had people reminiscing, had people yearning for nostalgia. And I have to say, it feels like they're not capitalizing on the momentum that was there. And I'm not sure exactly what that would have looked like, especially when you want to load up and get ready for what January is to come. And you want to make sure you're coming out swinging when it really counts. You don't want to waste the bullets. It's almost, resting your starters for the playoffs. You kind of know you clinched already. You have home field advantage coming up. You don't want anybody to get hurt. You don't want to kind of waste your ammunition when you know you have big games to play. And I think that is really the best sort of analogy you can make here is they're loading up for the playoffs, they're resting their starters, and we have to kind of sit through this.
And, maybe we should have seen this coming a little bit more, because now when you lay it out like that, me looking back, I think about the fact that you had Jordan Grace announce that she was going to cash in, her championship spot at Hard to Kill, and then Moose doing the same. we're calling out title matches in January at the, middle of October, end of October. That's a lot of time in between there. So yeah, I guess we probably should have seen this coming, especially after the TNA announcement. But I'm excited. It's got people talking. Everybody I've talked to about wrestling, all my friends in wrestling, whether they know that I'm do the show or they follow the product, have brought it up to me in the last couple of weeks. So it's definitely got a buzz around the product in a good way.
Yeah, and you run the risk of letting the motivation slide. And I think no matter what, once it gets kicked off and people see that logo on the canvas and they see it on the graphics and all that's going to bring the nostalgia rushing back, it just feels like you said. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I just feel like I was expecting a little bit more here. And I know we've been used to these bulk tapings and they do a good job of advancing stories at weeks at a time, knowing where they're going, making sure it's logical. And they did a great job for the build of these last pay-per-views, whether name it Emergence, Slammiversary, Bound for Glory, even the Multiverse show. They did a really good job building. This feels like, again, we have technically a pay-per-view tomorrow that's going to be airing on the Impact Plus app. We're going to be talking about the preview of Turning Point that took place in the UK already. It's taped, so we know it's canned results. It doesn't seem like anything big is going to happen. I did not see the results yet, so I would definitely be watching tomorrow night and making sure that I'm keeping up with the product. But this is sort of, par for the course now. We have to regroup. And I think, as we were working this out like a therapy session, it feels like they're gearing up for January. And hopefully, and I think it'll be worth the wait when the rebrand happens, that all the pomp and circumstance, all the polish, everything that's going to be shiny and new is going to be on that new product. And it's going to feel even better, especially since it's going to be 3 months until we get something good, similar to that, because right now, all these tapings, the UK stuff, it feels a little bit ho-hum.
Absolutely, man. I mean, we're looking at November 2nd. We got a solid 2 months till we get to January and the rebrand. So it might be a little bit of a long wait, but we'll be that much more excited when it comes around, I guess.
Absolutely. And really the only thing, guys, that will change in this show, we're going to change the bottom logo to a TNA logo. We're still going to be braced for Impact because it is going to be TNA Presents Impact. So this definitely is apropos for the show. It's not going to change. And we're going to be talking about all the TNA action going forward and the build for what is eventually, Hard to Kill might be their biggest pay-per-view in the history of the company, especially in recent memory, because of all the stakes that are in there. And you mentioned the build for these matches. Jordan Grace already kind of signaling her shot against Trinity. And then you just mentioned tonight, as we found out, Moose targeting whoever the world champion is going to be. I think at this point, we're expecting it to still be Shelley, but as we'll cover in the news, we're not sure how serious this injury is. So 2 really big matches set for this January pay-per-view, and they have 2 months of build, too much of waiting time, and 2 months of really just biding time until we get there. And I think it's going to build up the anticipation in a good way. We just have to kind of wade through these waters of, status quo type of stuff.
Right, which is something we've been spoiled, man. We've been spoiled all year long. We're not really used to kind of having to trudge through the same stuff for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. So, we got to do it for the end of the year through the holidays here. I think we can put up with it.
That being said, I do like that they're doing the international dates. We definitely were very stoked on them going to the UK. This was a big deal for them. The crowd in Glasgow was a little bit on the smaller side. They definitely had some energy throughout the night. It seemed like it was a longer night of wrestling. As you mentioned, they were showing highlights of the show. They showed the full matches that they did show, I think the 5 that we got, but there were other pieces of action we didn't miss because they did that GLASGOW Cup. They did the 4-match tournament happened in-house that same night. They only showed us the finals, but maybe they're worn down a little bit, but I think getting eyes on the product, especially in a place like Glasgow, Scotland, where they don't see a lot of live wrestling from other companies, it's great to see them going there. And then we mentioned Coventry. They went to Australia earlier in the year. These are good things for them to be doing. And hopefully as TNA, they're going to do the same thing and continue to stretch out internationally.
Absolutely.
So let's get to the inside, talk about all the news in Impact Wrestling, talk about all the stuff coming up, and really preview what's coming up this weekend with Turning Point. Well, let's get to the inside.
The inside.
All right, here we are for the insight, the news in Impact Wrestling. And as we discussed earlier, they're in the UK right now, or at least they're filming it. So they just finished up their 4-night tour, and there's several notes following this. And there's a lot of positive vibes coming out of the United Kingdom tour. And it was noted that Impact packed the house during the tour, lots of TNA chants happening every night. And this really felt like validation on their end that the TNA name was much more valuable overseas. And one of the reasons they finally made the choice to flip back. So the fact that they made the decision Bound for Glory, or made it well prior, but they announced it after Bound for Glory, they immediately go overseas, hop on a plane, and Colton, they're greeted with TNA chants. It has to be very validating for Scott D'Amore, who made that decision ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You're making a big jump. You know, a lot of people I know were initially a little confused, myself included, when the announcement first came through about the decision. I mean, this, like you said, this has got to be very validating. Scott D'Amore's got to feel vindicated to this point to come to packed houses over in the UK and hearing people chant TNA. It's got to be a good feeling.
So the other thing coming out of these tapings is one talent told PW Insider that the backstage morale is at the highest it has ever been since they joined the roster. Obviously, they were remaining anonymous, and they said, quote, "It's the highest in many years." The report continues that there are a lot of internal excitement about the promotion, especially since they were performing in their new state-of-the-art studio beginning in January. So we were mentioning before, for fans watching what was going on and what will be going on the next few weeks feels a little bit forecasted. It feels given away. But for the internal roster, there is this, it's like the beginning of Christmas season for them. They're waiting to see what their new toys are going to be under the tree. They're going to be seeing the new polish and everything beautiful that's going to be in that new Impact studio, plus the other exciting things that are going to be happening with the product. So for the talent, we already knew that this was a harmonious locker room. We've heard great things about talent going in there. We've talked about the relationships in there, and you never hear I don't think I've heard, since we've been doing this show for 20 weeks, haven't heard one negative thing about any member on that roster. We don't hear about conflict, and I'm sure it happens, but it feels like this is a locker room that is almost like a wrestling utopia at this point. And getting an investment from the higher ups and feeling like people are buying into what you're doing has to feel really good, and you're seeing it outwardly on this roster.
Yeah, man, it's always good to hear that kind of news. I mean, like you said, Impact's locker room seems to be unique compared to many others, and just the fact that some people who don't always do well in other companies seem to thrive here and really, flourish and get along. And to hear that with the announcement that the morale's higher than ever, man, that's the result that you want. That's exactly where you want to be after making an announcement like that.
So unfortunately, we heard about an injury happened on this UK tour, and Alex Shelley apparently hurt his calf. We discussed this on Wrestling Tonight at length, but really there's been no update because then there's no timetable about when he'll be able to return. He was pulled after what was taped on Friday last week, Turning Point, which will air tomorrow. And Scott D'Amore in an interview said that Shelley will, quote, "need a little bit of rest and a little bit of time before he returns to Impact," adding that's going to be a good change for him to rest and recharge. So according to PW Insider, Shelley suffered extremely pulled calf muscle during the tag match that we watched tonight in Scotland. And I think he re-aggravated it wrestling at Turning Point as well. So the calf has been barking for him for a bit. We've heard about this injury. There's been wear and tear. He's been going strong as the champion, carrying the torch for Impact Wrestling. This is a blow for them. But again, as I mentioned before, if you want to make a silver lining of it, there's so much stuff in the can right now for taping wise. He literally has until mid-January to get rested, and hopefully by then the calf is better.
Yeah, man. I mean, you never want to have an injury sideline you, but you couldn't have picked a better time for Alex Shelley to have something that's going to, especially something that's hopefully not too severe. It's not like, it doesn't seem like an injury that would require surgery and rehab. It just, he needs a little bit of rest, and thankfully they're in a place to give it to him, man. I mean, if you were watching the match tonight, you can see a couple of times very, very distinctly where he grabs for the calf. Even if you didn't know this, going into tonight's show, you can tell that something's up. And that's pretty nagging, good call for them pulling him from the card the next night just to, get him the rest that he needs. You definitely don't want to pull your world champion off of a card, especially when you're, overseas performing live shows for fans that don't get to see you on a regular basis. But, it just shows how much that the Impact brass cares about their talent, and the fact that, you just do the right thing and put him on the shelf for now. And like you said, we've got until January, man. We got quite a ways to go. So hopefully that's plenty of time for him to get rested up, and we wish Alex Shelley a speedy recovery.
So Shelley made the trip over to Newcastle, England for the next night for Turning Point. He was set to face Brian Myers and Moose by teaming up with Chris Sabin, obviously. he did not wrestle. He made an appearance. Frankie Kazarian took his place. So maybe he was planning on working and he decided against it when it didn't feel like it was getting better. As we mentioned before, really working in his favor is that Impact really only has 2 more live events this year. That's right. Count them 2. They have the comedy Throwback Throwdown 4, which is that in-character type of Chikara show they have. So I'd imagine he probably wouldn't be working that either way. And then they have Final Resolution, which we'll talk about. We're being announced that it's in Toronto on December 9th. There's no more TV taping scheduled for the rest of the year. They are getting ready, as we mentioned, for all the rebranding. So he legitimately could miss the last 2 live shows, and the Impact storytelling wouldn't really be worse for wear because we have that John Gresham defense taped. They're probably going to air it next week. He's probably wrestled in those other Bound for Glory Fallout tapings, so we're going to see that as well. So you can also throw in some studio level promos, and there you go. You have it pretty much. You can bridge that gap and get there. The real thing is you want to make sure he's 100% ready to go, because we know calves. I mean, speaking of athletes and sports, the calf is something that continually can get hurt, especially when you're constantly moving around. It's not something you want to play around with, and luckily he has the grace of time, but we know those things take a while to heal.
Yeah, and it's one of the benefits of taping and bulk, man, is right here. You get hurt with, like you said, we got a lot in the can, so hopefully he gets the rest that he needs, and it's not too serious.
So paired with this taping is an announcement from Scott D'Amore that the promotion plans to return next year. This was said during an interview with Tom Campbell of Cultaholic Wrestling, and the quote from Scott D'Amore was, "We're looking at options right now, and we'll be back here in the UK in 2024. We're just trying to figure out our schedule. It boils down to a combination of our schedule, what's going on here in the marketplace, and the availability of venues. But we have a few things circled on the calendar, and after taking a little bit of time to breathe and I get a couple deep breaths and settle in, we'll be back to tackling exactly what the right time is to be back in the market, but definitely 2024. So really awesome to hear. Not unsure if they're going to be doing the same stops of Glasgow, Newcastle, and Coventry, but the fact they're coming back to the UK has to be very exciting for the fans of TNA wrestling. Looking forward to 2024.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. And this, I thought, tonight it was a cool looking room where they were at in Glasgow. It looks like a neat venue, man. And it was a good turnout. So yeah, glad to hear they'll be going back.
As we mentioned, they still have one more pay-per-view following in December, early December 9th at the Don Kolov Arena in Toronto is going to be held Final Resolution. So this was announced with a press release talking about a whole bunch of stuff coming up. So it's going to be airing on Impact Plus, a special going back to Toronto. We discussed this before. Chicago and Toronto, rinse, repeat. This feels like markets that are very, they fit Impact like a glove. It's become their home away from home. The crowd loves them. They're producing shows there on a bi-monthly basis at this point. So they announced tickets will be going on sale. But, maybe they're going to be moving away from the Chicago and Toronto market, stepping away from really home base and going to explore different markets and potentially maybe try out the Northeast a little bit, maybe go out, further West Coast, something like this. But this feels like the final hurrah of what was the old version of Impact Wrestling that we knew and loved. Toronto is a great place to kind of say goodbye to it.
Yeah, man. Great place to wrap it up. They've had incredible shows in Toronto for the last few years. This year alone, the shows they ran in Toronto were some of the best crowds they've had the entire year. So I think it's very fitting that you do Final Resolution there. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm excited to see them try out some new markets.
So in this press release, they obviously announced Final Resolution, but they did talk about Hard to Kill, talk about the tickets coming on sale. The other interesting thing they said was, and this is what it said in there, quote-wise, New Year will launch a new look TNA wrestling that runs from the entrance ramp to turnbuckles in the ring and much, much more. So this is going to be run from the Palms in Las Vegas. So this was interesting that they made sure to mention everything about the entrance. And we knew they were going to get a new production set. We knew all that stuff, but it was very interesting to hear them make that clear in the press release. So this is obviously something very important that they want people to know they're going to look completely different.
Yeah, man, that's good. I think it's good that they're getting out there and putting that, in everybody's, the forefront of everybody's mind going into this show at Hard to Kill. I will say, man, it makes me a little bit nervous that this first big event under the TNA banner is going to be in Vegas. Vegas is not exactly a wrestling town. I mean, we've seen AEW with Double or Nothing, especially this year, man, turnout was not great for a really good card. Vegas, there's a lot of competition for entertainment in Vegas on a night-to-night basis, on a night-to-night basis. So, hopefully just the buzz of going back to the TNA brand and the anticipation of seeing what the new set and the new ring post and turnbuckles and everything look like will help get a bigger crowd in there.
Yeah, it seems like there'll be a buzz at least to get them in the door. And then we're going to have the TV tapings following what they're calling the Snake Eyes Extravaganza, set for January 14th, 2024 at the Palms. So that's going to be the day after Hard to Kill. So interesting enough, they're staying with that model. I'm unsure if it's going to be multiple weeks of tapings. We are unsure of that. I know that typically following a big pay-per-view like Bound for Glory or Slammiversary or Emergence, they would have 4 to 5 weeks of tapings, whether in the same arena or just in like a stone's throw reach of the arena they ran the pay-per-view in. So I'm wondering if they're doing that here, if they're going to change the model. They're going to do one night of tapings after this. Don't really know, but they did say they were changing the way they do TV, Colton. So this will be a good gauge about how they're going to be doing TV going forward. And if they're just going to put polish on these tapings, or are they going to go closer to live than they've ever done? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, man, because I think the taping model that they're following now, obviously they have made work for them. They've got it down to a science and they've done a really good job, but I like the idea of them getting closer to live, maybe just doing, instead of 4 nights worth of tapings, you're just doing 2 nights worth of tapings in one show, or maybe even just 1 week of tapings. Who knows? You're just staying a week ahead every time, but be interesting to see how they play it out.
Yeah, so we'll definitely keep an eye on that. And of course, everyone's going to be looking forward to what's going on in Vegas. I think it's going to have a big fight feel. Not sure what the capacity of Palms Casino Resort is, but it's definitely not outshooting what they can do. It's not like they're trying to run MGM Grand or trying to run where the Vegas Knights play. It's not like they're trying to do something like that. They're going to definitely stay within reach. Maybe as time goes on, they're going to gauge exactly, because we know how popular they are in the UK, and we talked about this all the time. We watched this Glasgow arena tonight. It felt like they could have done bigger business, but they chose to stay within the safe confines of these smaller run intimate arenas, which there's a benefit to it. Don't get me wrong. I like when they run these smaller arenas, but I remember there was a day, 2006, 2007, when they were running pretty big arenas with sold out crowds. And we're not getting that. Even the Australia tour, we got very independent feel shows, which it's not a bad thing, but I would imagine with the TNA rebrand, they would want it to make it look a little bit different.
Yeah, you would think so.
So we also have more quotes, because Scott D'Amore has been doing a lot of media, and he's been asked about CM Punk over and over again, and he's been pretty transparent about CM Punk being in the locker room and the Fallout tapings for Bound for Glory. And Scott D'Amore spoke with PW Mania and talked just about having Punk visit the backstage of the promotion at the Chicago tapings. And he said, it's not a secret. CM Punk was backstage the day after Bound for Glory. That's nothing new. He was backstage earlier this year when he was under contract at AEW, and they were just getting ready for the debut of Collision. So we have a pretty open door policy. If you want to come by and visit, as long as you're respectful to our crew, you'll be respected. It was a pleasure to have when he came around. So is there a possibility he is here in the future? You never know. He also continues, is there going to be a place for veteran talent and senior talent in TNA wrestling? Of course, the value can't be understated of good senior veteran talent right now with name recognition and drawability as well. The door is open. So, of course, this is not news. Anytime CM Punk's name pops up, it will definitely draw clicks and headlines and all that. But this is not news for Scott D'Amore to say the door is open for CM Punk. I think this was obvious, Colt. Like, it was always going to be, if it makes sense for both parties, they were always going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing, I think this news story what's more telling about this, other than the fact, of course, the door's open, but I just like how Scott D'Amore is always straight up. He's not trying to downplay anything. He's not trying to inflate anything. He's just going to tell you how it is. And I really appreciate that about him, man. He always kind of shoots everybody straight when he does any sort of media. And, the guy's been doing a lot of it ever since they've made this announcement. So yeah, I appreciate him, always being forward and forthcoming rather. And, he's no bullshit and no frills, no bells and whistles, just really telling it like it is.
So there's also a conversation about the way the Impact roster has been constructed, of course, with the younger talent, the women's wrestling, but also the veterans. And we watched a big veteran go for now with Sami Callihan. There's no news about him coming back. We know that he was a guest at AEW Collision a few weeks ago. We know his contract ran up. The same could be said about PCO. We knew his contract was ending up a couple days ago. He wound up re-signing. So the door is never really closed on these veterans, but that is a priority for a locker room like Impact, because homeostasis is having these guys that can guide the younger talent and keep everyone guided and have advice to lean on. And some of the guys have been there and done that. And like he said here, and you can make it about CM Punk, but you can make it about other veterans that are a priority of this locker room. It can be about work rate, but it's also about really these stalwarts of the locker room, similar to Sami Callihan. Without him there's definitely a need for someone to kind of fill that void and take the lead. Because, I mean, we look at this roster of veterans that are out there, whether it be Chris Sabin or Alex Shelley, but even the Eric Youngs and the Josh Alexanders, they're there. But I think they would definitely have a priority about bringing somebody in with a wealth of knowledge like a CM Punk, if it makes sense in the future. And I think it could make sense, especially if CM Punk wants to come in and prove everybody wrong. And I think that that's a dangerous thing when someone's motivated by haters and motivated by naysayers. And I think CM Punk has a lot of that chip on his shoulder to come in there and be a model citizen.
And man, yeah, if that's what he wants to do, if that's where he's at, I think there's no better place than Impact TNA for him to do it.
So we'll see exactly where that goes. And of course, anytime Scott D'Amore is in media, they're going to ask him about it. And if they come back to Chicago, I guarantee Punk will be there because he enjoys wrestling. He'll probably be in the back watching it. But we also talked about Will Ospreay, and Will Ospreay actually worked the cards, and he was at the Fallout tapings, of course, wrestled an amazing match that received 5.25 stars from Dave Meltzer. Only the second ever 5-star match in the history of Impact Wrestling, which was insane to hear about. The other one was in 2005, which was the triple threat between Chris Daniels, Samoa Joe, and AJ Styles. So it's a big deal, whether you people value Dave Meltzer's ratings or not. It's a big deal in the media market for a match like this to get eyes on it over 5 stars. But I digress. He also talked about Will Ospreay and was nothing but complimentary. And there's a lot of leverage on both sides. There's a lot at stake here. Potentially Will Ospreay being the hottest free agent in all pro wrestling. If he chooses to come to what would be the rebranded TNA, this would be a huge get. We talked at length about it last week, but I think Scott D'Amore coming out and being complimentary about saying how much of a pleasure he was to have backstage and what he meant to have in the locker room just further emphasizes really, I think it's going to be a wooing process from people to bring Will Ospreay in. And I think no one's giving more flowers than Impact. I don't think anyone else is going to do a lot of begging. They don't have to, but I think it definitely well suits Impact/TNA to go out there and try to convince Will Ospreay, like, you could be a part of this weekly if you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think it's important to put that out there and make him, it shows that you as a promotion take yourself seriously as an option for him. And I mean, I think that's done wonders. The fact that Will Ospreay is even, putting that out there, that TNA Impact could be, it's a potential, it's an option for him, and it's a viable option. I think that speaks volumes about the state of the promotion, and and also the type of person that Will Ospreay is. So yeah, I think you got to keep putting it out there and keep that in people's minds, and try to court him. He'd be crazy not to.
So he continued, and this quote was, and I quote, "Will Ospreay just came in and did 3 events for us. He was a pleasure to have around, and I think it's great for Will to let his feelings be known about how much TNA wrestling meant to him. He said he's a TNA kid. He was inspired to be a wrestler watching AJ Styles on TNA wrestling." And he continued, "To me, that's one of the cool things that we are a part of, inspiring a guy whose contract is up in February 2024. Where's he going? Who knows?" For him to sit there and say, no matter what happens in February of next year, I'm always going to be supportive of what's going on in TNA, was so special to me. That's cool to come out of the mouth of arguably, in my opinion, the greatest wrestler in the world right now. So you mentioned it before, win, lose, or draw in this Will Ospreay sweepstakes, lottery, whatever you want to say, him even considering it and speaking kindly about it into the universe, it means more than people actually realize, because Will Ospreay, his opinion, his whatever he says holds a lot of weight in the wrestling business. And the fact that he's complimentary, not only of the culture, but also of just the environment that's been cultivated in Impact Wrestling, it's going to have, we don't know. Someone may read that quote and decide to give it a chance, whether it be a fan or a future talent. this means a lot. And I really hope that they find a way that Will Ospreay can come in, even if it's on a part-time basis, to get him in the door, because what we saw with him and Mike Bailey and what we're eventually going to see with him and Josh Alexander in that match that airs on the tapings, man, there's so much potential there. And there's a lot of creativity and a progressive way of booking him where he doesn't really shoehorn him and leave him a little bit segmented on an AEW roster, which has a lot of talent. I'm not saying that Impact doesn't. There's a chance for him to do something special and be a part of building something to be a legitimate, contender to be a number 2 against AEW. They really have a shot to do something special, and he could be a guy you build around.
And what a better time to do it than right now with the rebrand and the move back to TNA. Obviously it was impactful on him as a kid and, as a young aspiring wrestler. Yeah, I mean, February is going to be here before we know it, man. I mean, we talk about how we've got a long way between now and January, but we're going to blink and it's going to be here. So yeah, it's exciting time. And like I said, I think it speaks volumes about the promotion. And as an Impact fan, I'm just tickled to death to think that it's on the table. It might be a long shot because he can literally go anywhere that he wants. But the fact that it's on the table has got me hopeful.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and I understand that he has a built-in storyline. I mean, for God's sakes, he has the painting that probably has his face on it when the Don Callis family, like that's ready and willing and made. He could be on TBS and TNT and reach a lot more eyes and all that. But there's something to be said about building something special. And I'm not saying they're building TNA from the ground up, but they are starting from a spot that he really could be that guy and be influential, similar to AJ Styles was for him growing up. And can he have that impact in AEW? Maybe. I think he has more of a chance to have a further impact on a promotion over in TNA. And, maybe that's what he wants to do. Maybe it's not. But I think it's so top heavy in AEW, and same thing with WWE, that you have the syndrome of being lost in the sauce. And he could be not just a guy, he could be the guy in TNA. And trust me, and we've heard those Scott D'Amore quotes, he'll strap the rocket to him and put everything in him. They'll book him extra strong, and I think they use the word showcased. So he could be that guy for them, and we'll see if he makes that choice. Personally, don't think he is. I think he's going to AEW. I think it's pretty much signed, sealed, and delivered. I think he'll get the opportunity to come back here and work in Impact in different ways because of the relationship and the way Tony Khan does business. But I don't think TNA is going to be his home, unfortunately.
Yeah, same here. I got to agree, man. But I just can't get out of my head the fact that he said, he grew up watching AJ Styles in TNA, and that made him want to be a wrestler. And brother, if you come here, you're gonna be AJ Styles and then some. There's guarantee. There's no you're gonna be that guy. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you, man. I think with AEW, the way that they do business, it gives him the option to continue to go places like Impact, go back to maybe New Japan here and there. And the fact that the open door policy they have has got it. It's almost too appealing.
And we all know that, I mean, the place to be is where he'll go where he wants, and there's going to be suitors after him. And hopefully he gets life-changing money because he's put his blood, sweat, and tears into this business. And I think whenever these guys become free agents, especially the ones that have toiled on the independents and worked their way up from pretty much nothing, making a name for themselves on weekend bookings and all that, they deserve to make sure that they secure that bag and make sure they're set for life, especially with what he's put his body through. So, I want him to be able to secure that for himself. And it further emphasizes, talent first motivation and things like that for the talent to get what they deserve, not promotion first thinking. We want these talents to get the amount of money that they deserve, much more money than they've ever gotten. So go out there and get your millions of dollars, boys. You guys deserve it. So we also, speaking of free agents here, and Sunny Kiss made her appearance at Bound for Glory during that Battle Royal, but she is still a free agent. And despite having debuted there, she has not signed with the promotion. And this was a quote that she had on Women's Wrestling Talk recently. She said, "I am not signed to Impact Wrestling. Let me just give that disclaimer right now. I'm open to wherever I'm supposed to be." So we know that she had a run in AEW 2019 until her contract expired earlier in 2023. She talked very fondly about Tony Khan, her time there, talked about how she likes what they're doing over in TNA/Impact, talked about potentially wrestling or tagging with Trinity. She did wrestle her at Bound for Glory Fallout show on October 22nd, which we will see. She wasn't on this UK tour. but she also was just complimentary of the locker room, again, further emphasizing what's going on there and cultivating this culture that continues to grow into something special.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Sonny Kiss a hell of a talent. Wherever she ends up, whichever roster that she decides to call home next, I mean, they're going to be lucky to have her, man. She's also friends with Tommy Dreamer, so I think that could be a factor. Like you said, she hasn't signed an exclusive deal, but a lot of talent don't sign exclusive deals with Impact. It's a place where Scott said it. If you want to come in and visit and you want to come in and be around, as long as you're respectful to the crew and the people here, you're going to be welcomed. And a lot of people operate on this roster with a handshake deal, man, and kind of come and go as they please, which I think is a good thing.
So we'll definitely see if she's returning here, and if she does take independent bookings. We've seen her House of Glory. She was at Brooklyn Comic-Con for from independent wrestling. So we've seen her make some post AEW stuff. So we'll see where she winds up. And like you said, I think any promotion that has her will be very lucky. But speaking of a young talent signed and secured, so at the UK Invasion Tour in Coventry on Saturday, it was announced that 19-year-old Leon Slater signed a long-term contract with TNA. So he made his Impact debut on night one of the tour, which was last Thursday. If you guys are familiar with it, I was talking about him on Wrestling Tonight. He is a guy who does a 450 swanton, a very unique athlete. He did win the Rev Pro British J Cup tournament earlier this month. He made his New Japan debut. He competed at Royal Quest 3 in London. This special talent. And this is really the first big signing they've had. They re-signed PCO. But since this was TNA and the timing worked out, he will be known forever as the first ever signing for TNA wrestling, or the new era, I should say. And they're building towards the future. This kid is 19 years old. Like I said, very special. If you haven't seen him work, goddamn, go out and check it out. He's going to be something that maybe the future of the X Division, maybe a future of just the main event, but long-term contract, we don't have the scope of the length, but really big deal that they went out there and invested in the future.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And it's a nice, that thing that adds a lot of, value, kind of really puts an exclamation point on this tour of the UK for them to come over here and then be able to make that kind of announcement and say, hey, man, we came over here and we're picking somebody up, one of the most talented guys over here doing it. I personally have not seen a whole lot of Leon Slater's work. I've read a ton about the kid, so I'm looking forward to diving in and on YouTube and catching some of his stuff, and then also seeing him on the TNA roster come January.
So we also had Rob Van Dam talking about Impact Wrestling rebranding back to TNA, and there were a lot of positive vibes around this, some negative, obviously, with some of the negative history that comes with TNA, but it was interesting to get RVD's thoughts because he was involved in Impact recently. He's a guy who is involved in AEW loosely now, WWE Hall of Famer. He definitely talked about this at length because he has his podcast, which is interesting to hear his thoughts on things. And his quote was, I don't know what went into the decision to do this. I don't have the info. Without that insight, it could be a good or bad business decision. They could have moved intellectual properties. They could have moved from one LLC to another, but for who knows what reason. Maybe they have new investors. I have no idea. But just based on that question, going back to TNA Wrestling from Impact Wrestling, this is just my opinion. I'm not trying to talk shit on anybody. I don't see it making that big of a difference. So he also reiterated his point that TNA comeback is not earth-shattering news, nor will add much value to the company name. So it's a pretty big name coming out here and saying that this doesn't mean anything. Do you feel like he has this holds weight that could have maybe influence people's opinion on this? Or do you just think this is a guy who it's a one-off thing that maybe he's an outsider on this opinion? Because it feels like he's the only guy saying this, because it feels like all I've heard is the outpouring of positivity about the name change.
Absolutely. And I don't think Rob's necessarily wrong. Like, I see his point here, but I see it as this is his viewpoint as a wrestling insider, like as somebody in the business. Like, of course, in his conversations, TNA and Impact are going to be used interchangeably, but like he's not the fan. He's not the TNA fan that this this nostalgia grab is getting hooks in and bringing to the product. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to sway anybody. I think this is pretty, typical RVD, just, being no bullshit and saying what's on his mind and selling it, the way that he does. I don't think that he's necessarily in the wrong here. I just think that it's a very pigeonholed perspective, and the fact that, you know, as him being a professional wrestler who's been in the business for a while, you know, obviously it's interchangeable to him, so it doesn't make a huge difference. But yeah, I mean, I think it is going to bring a lot more eyes to the product. People who were huge TNA fans back in the day who haven't really, you know, maybe haven't been clued into what Impact's been doing the last 3 or 4 years. This is going to bring them back in, at least for a little bit, and get more eyes on the product. So I think, yeah, I think he's missed it a little bit here, but from his perspective, I understand that's why he would feel like that.
So a quick shout out to Tyson. What's up, dude? Thank you for watching. And also J-Bone, what's up, dude? What's up, my brothers? Absolutely, dude. Thanks so much for watching. We appreciate the support. Last piece of the news here is previewing Turning Point, which is going to be airing tomorrow night, obviously on delay. We talked about it last week, the matches that were happening. We'll run through some of these matches, Colton, and talk about, you know, I guess our interest level. I don't think we're going to preview every match. Like I said, there's not a lot at stake here. This feels like a continuation of what we saw tonight. Maybe there'll be a little bit more polish on it because it was presented for the Impact Plus app. Who knows? Who knows? But so some of the matches here, we have Joe Hendry versus Simon Miller. We have Giselle Shaw versus Alex Windsor. Rich Swann versus Frank Kazarian versus Trey Miguel. Motor City Machine Guns versus Moose and Brian Myers. Jordan Grace versus Danny Luna. We have Eric Young and Josh Alexander teaming up versus Subculture, Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster. Will Ospreay versus Eddie Edwards. And the Impact Knockouts World Champion Trinity defends against Deonna Purrazzo. So really 2 main events on this card. Will Ospreay versus Eddie Edwards has been definitely, especially on this show, they put a lot of hype and heat on this match between Will Ospreay and Eddie Edwards. But Trinity and Deonna Purrazzo running back the Slammiversary main event. Deonna Purrazzo hasn't really had a lot of momentum. They're just kind of cashing in for a former world champion taking on Trinity. Your thoughts on this card and excitement level from, let's just say, 1 to 10?
I think it's a good card. I mean, for me, excitement level, I'm probably going to put it at, like, you know, maybe a 6.5 out of 10. But I mean, mainly just because for me, with the Impact Knockouts Championship, we've seen this match, but the UK crowd hasn't necessarily got a chance to see it. True. So, you know, it's big for them. I get that. Will Ospreay versus Eddie Edwards is going to be very cool. Jordan Grace versus Danny Luna, I think, is going to be a hell of a match. I think the match that I would be most excited about is this 3-way between Rich Swann, Frankie Kazarian, and Trey Miguel. That's going to be an absolute banger. I've never would have thought to put those 3 together, building a card. It's obviously a bit of a hodgepodge, but I'm excited about it because of all 3 of those guys can go. I love a good triple threat. And, the Joe Hendry, Simon Miller has some heat on it, not necessarily as much for us American fans. I don't think Simon Miller is on everybody's radar as a YouTuber talent, if you will. But, he does have a bigger following over there. And, Joe put a little promo out on him tonight as well after he picked up a big win. So, yeah, I'm a big fan, even if I'm not aware or super familiar with an outside talent. I'm a big fan of promotions bringing out people who are media stars of a different type of media and incorporating them into pro wrestling. I think that's real cool. I like that. Even I've been a big fan of the way that WWE's done it with Jake Paul. You can say you want about the guy. Like, I'm not a huge fan of his brand or his
Logan,
image.
you mean, right?
Or Logan. Yeah, sorry, Logan. Not
Jake
not
Paul
Jake.
would be sick to bring in too.
That would be pretty sick. But yeah, with Logan, man, it's not that I'm a fan of his brand necessarily or what he puts out there, but I think when you're able to bring somebody that's got that much buzz behind them, and then Logan Paul, somebody who actually fell into the fold really well and actually does pretty damn well in the ring. I think it's just smart business. It's a good way to get eyes on your product that might not have been there before. Somebody that's got a following, why not bring them in? And maybe they don't stick around forever, but it gets new eyes on your product, gets people talking, and they might tell somebody they know that's a wrestling fan, like, oh man, I watched this show because Simon Miller was on. You should really check it out. And there's just it's good business practice. Always a fan of it, especially when you can tie it in well.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely has it's within the range of what could be expected for them. They're not going out and grabbing Bad Bunny or Logan Paul, but this is in the range of really bang for your buck type of thing. They're not going to invest in bringing in a celebrity that would blow the bank off the top of it, and they don't want to, in lieu of bringing in better talent, pay celebrities and stuff like that. So Simon Miller is right in the gauge of, it kind of feeds both masters. It brings in an audience maybe you wouldn't get, but it also ties in really a Joe Hendry storyline that makes sense. I think Joe Hendry is this antagonist type of character that can play either heel or face really well, depending on the perspective of the person he's wrestling. But his ability to really draw the ire of his opponent has been well established here. And I think he's going to bring the best out of Simon Miller and vice versa. I think it's going to be really fun to see. But this card itself, like we mentioned, you mentioned being, I think you said a 6, right? For excitement. I'm probably going to go
6.5. Give it a
5.5 myself. I think there aren't a lot of stakes for this card that takes it away. They did construct the card strategically that it doesn't get hurt by being taped. Despite the Impact Knockouts Championship out there, it's really the only match that you probably nothing's going to happen because it's taped. And I mean, nothing was going to change anyway because there's bigger plans for Trinity. You're not putting the title back on Deanna, but the rest of these matches could go either way. Even if it's taped, you're not really going to see the results of this elsewhere. It's not like a big title change. Kind of clever the way it was constructed and very strategic. And we get to see the team of Eric Young and Josh Alexander again. We saw them team for the first time tonight on these GLASGOW tapings. That should be a fun match. And I think this card is built around work rate. They want to bring you to the table by watching matches that are exciting and entertaining in their own way without really at the expense of telling major stories that are going to blow you away. And sometimes cards like this, you have to make the exception, especially it's not airing live. This is what you have to do. It's airing 3 days later, 4 days later, whenever it was taped. This is important to bring people to the table. Be like, you have to see this Will Ospreay versus Eddie Edwards match. Doesn't matter who wins. Doesn't matter. Similar to Mike Bailey versus Will Ospreay. With that on people's mind, they're going to check it out. And there's matches on here that could steal the show. So I think that's going to be enough to get people to at least be entertained on a Friday night.
Absolutely.
So let's get to the blow by blow and talk about all the action from Glasgow, Scotland. So let's get to the blow by blow. Let's put our kilts on though, Colton.
Blow by blow.
All right, we're in Glasgow, Scotland. We're taking our trip over here for the first stop of the UK Invasion Tour. We get the We Own the Night opening video, but then we kind of pop back in the studio we've become accustomed to on these, really this compilation highlight show with Tom Hannafin and Matthew Raywald. They opened the show and said we'd be seeing matches from Glasgow, Scotland. They didn't say this taping. It wasn't taped fully for TV. It felt like we were looking through one of those like ballpark cams in the outfield of just like, we're just peering into what was happening on the night. Not a lot of storyline advancement. This was just a night of entertaining house show type of popcorn matches. And it wasn't a bad thing. It almost like you didn't have to watch to advance story.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you saw a lot of good matches on this card, but if you missed tonight's show, you're not really missing any sort of storyline progression per se. But yeah, this was it's an interesting look, man. We've gotten really accustomed to, especially, we've been getting bits and pieces of this elevated production value that they've been teasing for the last few months. And that was not what we got tonight. Obviously, they did not travel with all of their camera gear that they usually have at the United States shows because the video quality was a little bit different, man. It was a little grainier, looked like it was at a different frame rate, which, like I mentioned earlier, the UK runs at 30 frames per second, they run at 30 or run at 25, and the US runs at 30. So that's going to translate a little weird. Also, just a lot of really kind of choppy cuts. The camera work was just a lot different than what I'm used to from seeing Impact tonight. So yeah, this had a very different feel all around. But we opened up the card with the final of the Glasgow Cup 2023 being Joe Hendry versus Frankie Kazarian. So there had been two other semifinal matches, which was Joe Hendry defeating Rich Swann via pinfall and then Kazarian defeating Heath via submission. Kind of weird that, we didn't get to see the other two matches, but, whatever. Glad to see Hendry go up against Kazarian. You guys are both, excellent talent. They gave him plenty of time here, man. This was 18 minutes. This was definitely they didn't rush him by any means. And it was very much kind of a 50-50 match, man. These guys really, went back and forth. And Hendry's the hometown guy here. He's going for the Glasgow Cup. How do you not put over, the Scot in this match? And that's what we did, man. Joe Hendry wins it. D'Amore comes out, presents him with the trophy, and then that's that for the opener.
Yeah, so I wish they would have put more stakes on this Glasgow Cup. It was a cool looking trophy. Maybe if they would have replaced two of the other matches and made tonight just about that Glasgow Cup and make it like a one-night mini tournament, it could have had something special where Joe Hendry could carry it around. But this, again, felt like inconsequential for anything, and it was awesome to see Joe Hendry win, don't get me wrong, and the fans were into this match. They were chanting TNA. They were chanting, "This is awesome." Match was great. 18 minutes of just action-packed stuff. And like I said, this was the type of match you see on a house show. This is what brings you in the door to see these live events, that they really pack in a lot into these minutes, and it feels like they're letting it breathe because they don't have the time constraints of a TV show. They really, because what they were doing in Glasgow, it's like go out there and have fun. And that's what it felt like here. A guy like Frank Kazarian, he's one of the TNA original type of guys going out there and working with a guy like Joe Hendry, who is organically over. And you mentioned being the fact that he's in his hometown. The fans were very much into what he was bringing to the table, singing along, even without his music on. They were singing, chanting, all that stuff. And, they definitely believed in Joe Hendry. So, again, I think it was cool to see the finals here. I wish there was a little more weight on this Glasgow Cup. Tell me why I should care, as outside of just it was a one-night thing that people were doing in their hometown. You could have done something cool with this to make the TV show around this Glasgow Cup, and it could have been a crowning moment for Joe Hendry. Instead, it just felt like a singles match where he was awarded some hardware, which it was just like, oh, okay, cool. He gets to drink out of this thing, and Scott D'Amore gives it out to him. It has potential to be cool, especially if you're going back to the UK next year. Could have been like the Dynamite Diamond Ring. You could have defended it. It could have been something that you did annually and just bring it back out to bring some meaning for that market. Missed opportunity, but this was a really awesome match in a vacuum. Two professional guys going out there and doing their thing. So, I mean, it was a fun match to watch. Like you said, almost 20 minutes.
Yeah, man, it was cool. I like what you said about the fact that the trophy almost feels like an afterthought in a lot of ways. And, we didn't necessarily need to see the semifinal matches in their entirety, but you could have, thrown together a quick video package recapping both of them, and then, put
right.
Right. Yeah. Put a little shine on that trophy, and it just, it felt like an afterthought. We saw a little, we didn't even really get a good close up of it. It was really just Scott D'Amore coming out and handing it off. And that was that.
Dude, I'm a sucker for trophies in pro wrestling. The Crockett Cup, give me that all day. The old school King of the Ring, give me that all day. I think there's not enough trophies in wrestling. Even the Owen Hart Cup has a really cool look to it. I mean, I think back to when Bad News Brown won the Battle Royal and he threw the trophy down, or Bret Hart, I forget. It was WrestleMania where Bad News Brown and Bret Hart were throwing trophies around. I like trophies in wrestling, and I think there should be more in it. Not everything has to be a championship belt. Not everything has to be, classically wrestling. Sometimes having a trophy could go a long way in producing and continuing storylines. So definitely a big fan of what they brought to the table with the idea of this. I just wish they would have put more momentum on it.
Yeah, I agree.
So we had this backstage segment with Brian Myers, Moose, and Deonna Purrazzo cutting a promo. Moose and Myers talked about traveling across the globe to face subculture, and then Deonna made it clear she'll use her match as a warm-up to beat Trinity at Turning Point to become the 4-time Knockouts champion. So they're trying to put some heat on this Trinity-Deonna match, which we know as fans watching this on a weekly basis that there's not a lot to this because Deonna and Trinity, that ship has sailed. That match has been completely in the distance. They're trying their best to make this feel important. I give them credit for it because these promos are important to piece together and make us look forward to the next week. So they still have the production value on these promos. You could still see it's the impact that we know and love here in these promos, just the matches that were filmed on what might have been the iPhone 14. Leave a lot to be desired.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I mean, it's tough for us to kind of go back through this because, we've seen it before, but like you said, like I said earlier, the UK fans, they, might have seen it on a pay-per-view, but they've not gotten to see it on their turf. They've not gotten to see Deonna Purrazzo versus Trinity, over in the UK. So I totally get, it's a good feud. Two, very well decorated, women wrestlers with, a lot of heat and I get it, but yeah, it's hard for it to not feel recycled for us.
So we get that Will Ospreay, Eddie Edwards video package, again, trying to emphasize the importance of Friday's airing of Turning Point. Will Ospreay is a goddamn star. Eddie Edwards, the pairing is interesting to me to have him wrestle Will Ospreay. Shows that they believe in Eddie Edwards, a guy who we mentioned the veteran presence in the locker room, the ability to continue to tell stories in the ring. It's nice to see Eddie Edwards getting the opportunity to work with Will Ospreay, especially at this stage. And should be a fun match. I think they're definitely going to deliver in a big way. So I'm looking forward to exactly what goes on with these two guys. So, I mean, did you think this match felt like it was a special thing going on? Colt, did I lose you? All right, looks like I lost Colton for a second, so I'm going to remove him from in here. So it looks like he's frozen, but we are definitely going to continue here, and I'll get his thoughts on the Will Ospreay, Eddie Edwards stuff going forward. But we have the ability to talk about this Joe Hendry promo. He talked about debuting in Impact, being in a successful tag team. He said he beat Rich Swann and Frank Kazarian to win the cup, and to prove he belongs on top, he then officially challenged Simon Miller. So as we discussed before, Simon Miller is the guy from YouTube. He's a guy who has a little bit of a following outside of wrestling. Joe Hendry has the ability to really build some momentum going forward. I like that they mentioned that Rich Swann and Frank Kazarian were on his defeated list here. He had the ability to beat them on the road to this Glasgow Cup. As I mentioned before, it would have been cool to have this being something they built to. Maybe they made it a one-night tournament, a la Survivor Series 1998 in a mini way, for an hour-long show. It would have been cool. But I'll let, maybe he'll build some momentum from here. I felt like Joe Hendry was stuck in mud, especially after teaming with Ua, after losing the Digital Media Championship. This is one of the guys who's organically over. So the ability to have him on our show doing something meaningful, I'm here for it. So Ray Wold explained that Hendry and Miller had gotten to a brawl during a food fight segment, and they would face each other at Turning Point. And then Ray Wold and Hannafin pitched the next match, which felt like it was in progress, right? Similar to what we were talking about before. There's these house show vibes where the mat, a lot of the entrances are not happening. I think we cut to this match mid Moose entrance. Then we got Brian Myers and Deanna's entrance. So very house show like. As we mentioned, the production wise, there's not a lot of polish on this type of stuff. It has definitely a lot of house show type of energy. And the match was fun though. I mean, seeing Subculture back, former tag team champions, they've been off of TV for a little bit here. Subculture being back is a big thing. Seeing Flash Morgan Webster and Mark Andrews teaming with Danny Luna, that was a cool package. Maybe I can see them doing that a little bit further. And then Deonna Purrazzo being with Moose and Brian Myers, that was a package that did work here as well. So having Myers and Andrews starting the match, gotta say Brian Myers, every time he's on our screen, he looks more and more like a main eventer. I mean, the guy has put on mass beyond belief. This is a guy who has really taken seriously his role in Impact. You can tell that he values really being looked at as a top guy. And the pairing of Moose and Brian Myers that at one time felt like it was a random pairing feels so natural now. And the two of them feed off each other, the charisma of both these guys, and having Moose and Brian Myers feed off each other has been immensely important for both of their characters. So this match, I mean, this was the epitome of a crowd-pleasing house show style match where you can see a lot of these different personalities. And if you were in the seats on this show, it's hard not to be entertained. We got more TNA chants during this, and Purrazzo got a lot of the good spots here. She got the best of Danny Luna with a Russian leg sweep. She locked in an armbar. We got a lot of the intergender stuff as well, seeing the women be highlighted against the men. And seeing at the end of the match with all 6 wrestlers exchanging their moves, that was one of the highlights for me. Seeing them all exchange, trademark and signature moves, and then Moose eventually spearing Andrews to get the pin was absolutely just, the right move here, especially after what was going on with Moose with Bound for Glory losing the match with PCO and all that. Putting momentum on Moose is very important going forward, especially as we look towards eventually Hard to Kill, where he's going to get a title shot. As we welcome Colton back in. What's up, dude?
Hey man, sorry to leave you hanging. HollerNet just gave out on me there. But just a quick restart and we're back to it. Where were you?
So we talked about the Joe Hendry stuff. We talked about the Eddie Edwards Will Ospreay promo, and then I just covered the Moose and Brian Myers, Deonna Purrazzo, and Subculture match, which I said to me was the epitome of a house show type of fun match with signature moves, just good times, good vibes, where like you just want to be in the building for a match like that.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Building Moose, continuing to build Moose as a heel, man. Got a big boot on Danny Luna here, which was I did not see coming. I really enjoyed that layer.
Yeah, seeing really all these guys and the personalities, and I was giving the flowers to Brian Myers and like really the transformation into a top guy. And I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg type of thing with Brian Myers and Moose, but their relationship has definitely bettered both of them in a big way. Just seeing them together, which felt like a one-off pairing back when it first started. It felt like just like, oh, cool, we need a tag team together. The two of them, they feed off each other, their energy, their charisma. And they've definitely emphasized, and I feel like Brian Myers has helped Moose as well further what he's doing with his character. It's been great to see, and they both feel like top guys.
Yeah, 100%, man. They're good. They're a good pair. They really feed off of each other very well. And I mean, Myers, man, you look at just his body transformation in the last 5 years. I mean, the guy's huge, and he works like a big man now. And it's very entertaining to watch.
So we have Josh Alexander and Eric Young backstage, and Alexander is saying that him and Young have their differences. They went over the accomplishments that they had in singles competition. This will be the first time that they team together. Obviously, Josh Alexander is very familiar with tag team work, as is Eric Young. They've just never teamed together. But they also referenced when we do something, we dive feet first. We decide to go all in. And what a better way to make your debut as a tag team against the Motor City Machine Guns, arguably the best tag team in the history of wrestling. This was a cool segment. And I got to say, man, and we'll talk about it in the main event, Josh Alexander and Eric Young, sneaky cool tag team. Like, you almost had a difficult time telling them apart in the ring if it wasn't for the headgear.
Very much so, man. Yeah, very similar looks and builds. And, Alexander's got a little height on him, but, two bald, pretty well-cut Canadians, man. It's cool to see these guys tag together. It's kind of wild to think that they never have, in all their time throughout TNA and Impact. But yeah, you said it well. Sneaky cool tag team's the way to put it, man. It's not something, and I don't think I ever thought about them teaming together, but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, also too, as we watch, and we'll cover that match in full, but like seeing tag teams that look alike in ways that aren't like too obvious. I'm not talking just matching tights, but the ability to just play it off where, and I think back to like Demolition, obviously, even like the Bashams back in the day.
Yeah.
To be able to do the double switch, like I like that type of tag team where, I don't know, it's not like they even changed the way they look for this match. They both just happen to wear red. They both always wear singlets. They are both bald. I mean, if Eric Young put headgear on, they literally would look like a brother tag team. You mentioned there's a little bit of height difference, but it could be something cool in the future, especially if you're not going all in on Josh Alexander being a world champion soon. We know they like to put their main eventers together, as we mentioned with Brian Myers and Moose. So, I mean, maybe like Rich Swann and Sami Callihan, we've seen tag teams could be grown out of this organic nature of putting matches together. Maybe we'll see more from Alexander and Young going forward.
Yeah, and we've seen it work, man. And yeah, it's nice when your presentation matches without trying very hard.
So we have Hannafin and Raywall talking about Alexander and Young teaming, but then they pitched to Grado and Trey Miguel before the match. They were hyping up the fact that Grado's back in Impact Wrestling, and we got no entrances for this, so they just start right in the ring. Nothing says more house show than just two wrestlers start in the ring. It's like an old school Coliseum video from WWF Superstars where it's just like, all right, Tito Santana versus Brutus Beefcake just in the ring. No entrances, baby. So Grado and Trey Miguel go out there, and this match started as a comedy match. And as time went on, like the Grado character, if you're not familiar with his work, he's a guy who has made his hay in the UK scene with comedy wrestling, which has a market for it. And Trey Miguel's athleticism can do whatever he wants. He can find ways to make matches competitive. He could play any role. And I think Trey Miguel showed a different side of himself in this match about trying to stay within the confines of the Rascals and what he does. But this built into a really good match following the comedy at first. I mean, the fans were enthusiastic to see Grado, which was added to the aesthetic of it. But I thought they did a good job with this. And, you can make the argument, maybe Trey Miguel shouldn't have lost, whatever. But again, if this is living in a vacuum in the UK tour, Grado was making his return back in his hometown. Like, why not? This was fun.
Yeah, I mean, how do you not put over Grado in his hometown? First time on Impact TV in a long, long, long time. You know, he's the victim of a Feast or Fired match back in the day where he ended up getting the pink slip. I thought that I thought this match was great, man, and it surprised me. You know, it started out like you said, it started out as a comedy match, but it transitioned into one of the better matches of the night by far.
Yeah, I think Grado definitely does this thing where he lulls you into a false sense of security where you think it's just going to be all comedy. And then he breaks out some of the fun stuff that we see here with, for his body type, you would not expect the athleticism that comes from him. And, Trey Miguel is a great dance partner, but Grado, you could tell like there's a reason why this guy is as popular as he is. So this was cool to see. And again, this lives in a vacuum on the UK Invasion Tour. Why not? Doesn't hurt Trey Miguel at all to do this here. And I just think Trey Miguel got his stuff in, and it just adds to the story. If you want an advanced story here, if you're trying to, the Rascals are down on the luck after losing the tag titles. It's just like, all right, let's rebuild going forward to whatever's next for Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz.
Yeah, this was good stuff. And if you wanna do more of this, you can. You know, you can either leave it where it is and not take it any further. But these guys were great dance partners, man. And I would watch this match. I would watch this, chapter 2, chapter 3, what have you, any day of the week.
So we have Eddie Edwards cutting a promo, and he went in on Will Ospreay saying, dude's one of the best in the world. And both of us have proved ourselves in Japan. He talked about Will's accomplishments as of late. And he said that Impact is my world and I'm the best here. And he also said that Will find out a turning point that things are a little bit different around here. So this feels, this is like a sub main event here. And I know there's not a world championship match outside of the knockouts division. So Alex Shelley's not defending his world title. This to me has big fight feel. But with Eddie Edwards, what he's accomplished in Impact, what Will Ospreay is attempting to accomplish in Impact of his short time there. This has a lot of weight on it. I think Will Ospreay goes over, but I think it's going to be a very competitive match.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt Will Ospreay goes over here. And just on the name recognition alone, before this promo, this match had a big fight feel for me. But I liked Eddie's promo a lot here. I liked what he said about Impact being his world and how things are a little bit different here. This is going to be a banger, man. And then the crowd is going to be real lucky to get this one in person.
So we lead into our fourth match of the night. It's Trinity in a non-title match against Emerson Jane. So we join the progress of mid-Trinity entrance, so a little bit disrespectful towards the Knockouts champion. We don't get her full entrance. It is what it is, but Emerson Jane is a native of Scotland, so this was a showcase of her here, and Trinity offering a handshake, but Jane not showing any respect here, and this was really what we talk about here on these Impact on AXS shows, where they don't do squash matches. They take away and figure out a way to highlight talent that they want to showcase. And Emerson Jane happened to be in that seat tonight, and Trinity found a way to make her look good in approximately 7 minutes non-title match. Of course, Trinity was never losing this match, but there was a lot of good spots in here that you can go out and say, wow, Emerson Jane held her own with the Knockouts champion. Suplex and Trinity, give her a Northern Light suplex for a 2 count. Using the ropes and her surroundings to down the champion for short periods of the match. Really cool to see. This was solid and definitely more competitive than it had any right being. But again, kudos to Impact what they do this. If they want to have I wouldn't even call it a squash match. It's like an emphasis match where Trinity, they want to make sure they're advancing her, making her look strong going into Turning Point the next night. But with Emerson Jane, who's there in town for the day, she came out smelling like roses too.
Yeah, it's a good exhibition for Emerson Jane, man. I like the way that Impact does that. They never really do a pure squash. Everybody kind of has an opportunity to be seen and show what they can do a little bit. And you don't have to do that going over to the UK, man. You're over here to strut your stars around for a crowd that doesn't get them very often. I thought the way that they did this was really cool. You hit the nail on the head when you said this match was far more competitive than it had any business being.
So we go into our main event here, the Motor City Machine Guns, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin taking on the first-time team of Josh Alexander and Eric Young. What else can you say? For the best workers in wrestling today and really ever going out in a tag match, what did you expect? The match was great. Went out there and did a lot of fun stuff. Motor City Machine Guns are just one of the examples of what you can do with main eventers in a tag team and continue to showcase them at a big level. And Josh Alexander and Eric Young, these are guys that have all been world champion. Like, this is really fun to see all these guys mixing it up, the different combinations. The one story that came out of this match was the Alex Shelley calf injury that was aggravated during this match. Unsure if it was the origin of this, where the injury came from, but this was obvious during the match. You and I were texting during it. Shelley went and grabbed his calf multiple times during this, and scary to see, especially with a lot of the stuff that Shelley has on the table in a couple of months. But like we mentioned before, I think with the time and the placement of when this happened, with only 2 more live gates during this stretch before January, hopefully he can rehab it and first of all, rest it. But this was a awesome match that, definitely didn't disappoint. And it was probably better live than it was here because of the production value, as we talked about. But man, stiff type of action that continues to impress every time these 4 guys are in the ring.
Absolutely, man. And I thought that Alexander and Young looked really good. This is their first time tagging together. You wouldn't have known that if, they meshed together very well. Good match. They gave it plenty of time. Motor City Machine Guns getting the win here. Just really unfortunate that we saw Alex Shelley get hurt here, and hopefully he has a speedy recovery with plenty of opportunity to rest coming up in the next few weeks.
So we are led out by Hannafin and Raywald, and they make sure they let us know we'll be going to be in Chicago next week. So I'd imagine, I can't guarantee it, we might get Josh Alexander versus Will Ospreay next week, and we're going to get John Gresham versus Alex Shelley. There's no guarantee on that because of the way things have been staggered. I would pretty much make it at like a 75% chance that they're going to lead the Impact Bound for Glory Fallout tapings with that, because there were people and I watch on YouTube and you see the chat popping off. People were wondering where that match was. You highlighted and you want to save Will Ospreay. Maybe it was strategic again. They didn't want to show Will Ospreay again, leading into what would be a pay-per-view and Impact Plus. They want to keep him as a showcase. He's not wrestling back-to-back nights. Who knows what the thought process was here, but we're going to be back to kind of business as usual in Chicago next week. I would say being in Glasgow is cool aesthetically. I wish they would have had their full production out there. I think it could have been really cool to really showcase this arena because, as you mentioned, really cool atmosphere. Just, again, felt like it was taped on an iPhone. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that too, man, was just the frame rate transition over. I've seen that type of stuff before. Same thing where if you shoot something on film and then try to play it back on video, it's going to look odd. Yeah, but it was just not great quality. It's not the quality that we were used to. But overall, some really good work on this card. Like you said, very much had a house show feel, and I mean that in the best way. Like, getting to see matches that you wouldn't necessarily see on a weekly TV, and everybody getting time to to get things in. Excited for next week, though, man. I mean, if Josh Alexander versus Will Ospreay is what we're getting next week, man. Spoiler alert, there's no way that's not match of the night. Like, the pick for next week already, if that's what we're getting.
And I just want to drive it home that I am not faulting them for kind of going through the motions until January. It almost makes sense. That's like getting mad at your favorite sports team. They clinch a playoff spot 2 months before the season's over, and then you're going to get mad at them when someone gets hurt or they lose in the playoffs because they didn't strategically plan out for it. I want them to make sure they're ready to go for Hard to Kill. That means making sure people are healthy, that they're using all their resources, that they're finding a way to put all the effort into it. And if that means that we're covering these canned episodes that feel lesser than for the next couple of months, so be it. It's an investment to the future. So I think this was, like you said, I think we should have forecasted it going forward, that we should have known that this type of stuff was coming, especially when we look at these Chicago tapings. There's 18 matches for the next 6 weeks. So we know in 6 weeks, we're going to be sitting, mid-December? As we mentioned, we really only have 2 more live events that are happening. One is Final Resolution. The other is going to be that Chikara type of show where they do the cosplaying of different gimmicks. And then you got to put in all this as a end of the year show. They're going to do a final awards type of stuff. I think we have all our content taped for the end of the year, so nothing is going to really change. We're probably going into Hard to Kill with the same champions, right? I'd imagine it's Alex Shelley versus Moose, Jordan Grace versus Trinity. Our tag champs are still going to be ABC. And I guess we're going to have to just get through these next 2 months of just all right, they're punting for now. We get ready for the second half. We move into what is going to be an exciting time. And hopefully you don't lose the momentum that's been built in this short period of time. And maybe you can just kind of stoke the flames. And when time goes, you put more gasoline on and get people excited for it.
And they've done a great job of being able to continue to keep things hot and stoke flames, man. They've been doing this bulk taping process for quite a while now. They're good at it. They know how to write for it. It's going to take us a while to get there, but it's going to be great. And man, once January comes, I'm fully expecting Hard to Kill to bring it. And, good for the Impact talent. I mean, if we've got everything taped, dude, these guys are off for the holidays already. It's November 1st. Good for them. I'm jealous.
No, I mean, there's something cool about that. I mean, just in a smaller dose of how we do it here. If we tape, when we did Shot Nostalgia, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, we taped like 5 episodes in bulk. And then as the weeks progress, you're like, next time you hit the podcast, you feel so well rested. So emphasize that and multiply it by 35 with pro wrestling. So I'm sure that, like you mentioned, we're still going to get an Alex Shelley match next week. And I'm sure he wrestled again on these Fallout tapings because it happened before this UK taping. So you're going to get your world champion on these shows. So it's not like you're going to be missing him. And that's the benefit of the bulk tapings. And there's a lot of downfalls for it, probably more downfalls than there are benefits. But that's the one outlier benefit that it is, that sometimes you can get the rest and also feature talent on a weekly basis without them being there. Same thing with Will Ospreay. You paid him off for 2 days, 3 dates, and he's still going to be on your TV mid-November, which is pretty damn cool.
Spread it out. Get your money's worth.
So we'll look forward to it next week. Like I said, we'll be back in Chicago for Cicero Stadium. But let's get into our impactful moment and pick our match of the tapings in Glasgow.
Impactful.
All right, here we are for impactful, Colton. So we had about 5 matches of action. And by about 5, I mean exactly 5 matches of action. So what was your favorite match, your impactful moment of the night?
I'm going to pick kind of a sleeper here, man, mainly just because it surprised me. I'm going to pick Grado versus Trey Miguel. I was not expecting this to turn into the match that it did, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it told a good story. Thought it showcased both guys really well, and it was cool to see Grado get a win here.
Man, that was a really good pick. I'm going with the main event here with the 4 guys that went out there and showed out. It's unfortunate that Alex Shelley got hurt. The match probably could have been even a little bit better because I think it was about 65% through the match where Alex Shelley started pulling at that nagging calf. So it's possible that this match could have been better. And that says a lot because the match was great in its own right, especially with the one-legged Alex Shelley. It was amazing. Seeing Eric Young take the fall here kind of shows where he's at in the card at this point.
Definitely.
And I think we're looking at the future of Impact. Like, they're going to be using this veteran talent in a different way. And I think it's really staggering people as we create this hierarchy going into what the reestablishment of the new era of TNA. And of course, Will Ospreay decides to come in February full time. He jumps the line. He's up there. Talk about Phil Brooks coming in, like he would jump the line and be there. But inside the roster right now, there's a really established main event scene that could be at any moment. You could shuffle the deck, toss a new guy at the top, and I think you'd be better suited for it because, I mean, there's a real good shot that Moose wins the title at Hard to Kill, and they reestablish what is going to be. I mean, he's Mr. Impact. So what's a better way to start 2024 with TNA, new rebranded belts with Moose, the guy that you put a lot of stock into, and he's been around for some tough times and some really good times.
Yeah, they don't call him the wrestling god for nothing, man. I could see that making a lot of sense to put the belt on him first, going forward with under the TNA moniker. Love having a heel champion, man. It's always something I like. You can always build. I always love a babyface chasing. So, yeah, man. That's I'm like we said, these next few weeks might be a little bit of a chore to get through at times, just for slow storyline progression. But where we're headed is going to be great, man. They're going to deliver.
Also, just want to make it clear, I don't know if we mentioned it last week, that when Josh Alexander was pinned at Bound for Glory, it was the first time in 2 years that he's been pinned. The last person to pin him was Moose, defeating him when he cashed in that title shot on him. So pinning Josh Alexander is a big deal. And we may see him get pinned again at the Chicago tapings because I don't think Will Ospreay is losing. I mean, that's another thing. We're going to be looking at 2 weeks in a row after technically, 2 out of 3 weeks, Josh Alexander eats a pin after not eating a pin for 2 years. I mean, it's definitely a different style of booking than we're used to with the walking weapon.
Absolutely.
So let's get to shock and awe, give our final wrap up, do some shilling, talk about next week, and really get ready for the weekend here at the Turnbuckle Tavern. Let's get the shock and awe.
Shock and awe.
All right, here we are for shock and awe, our final wrap up. Next week's show will be, believe it or not, November 9th for the weekly TV show on Impact. As we mentioned, they'll be in Cicero Stadium for night 1 of the Bound for Glory Fallout tapings. Hopefully we get Josh Alexander versus Will Ospreay. Maybe we're going to get out Alex Shelley versus John Gresham for the world title. Some other great stuff. On the listings of the matches, which we previewed last week, there's a lot of great stuff on those tapings. So tapping into some of the lucha stuff they have on deck for us. So that should be pretty cool to see that happen in Chicago. As we mentioned before, we're going to try to make the best of really what's going on here. We're going to be covering the news in depth as Scott D'Amore continues to do the media rounds. We're going to be covering it with a fine-tooth comb. You're not going to get your Impact coverage in a better spot than here because, you know, I think a lot of the other wrestling podcasts, even here on the Tavern, we gloss over bigger picture stuff because it falls through the cracks. We are fine-tuned on everything happening in TNA/Impact Wrestling.
Yeah, man, we're diving deep week to week. You're not going to miss a thing with us here, man, at Brace for Impact. And like they said, the name's not changing. As we move to TNA, the weekly show is still going to be called Impact. We're still Brace for Impact.
Yeah, maybe we'll ask Chad to do a little bit of, add some yellow to the audio drop logo just to put a little bit of the TNA love in it. But, you know, we are Brace for Impact. We've been covering for 20 weeks, and it's been such a blast covering this. And I think we are hopping in at the right time. And there's a lot of cool stuff on the horizon for this company, and it feels like we're in the ground floor of something very special. And will they challenge AEW in year 1 of, you know, this new era? No. But I think it's really cool to think that them as a brand that could really compete for free agents and compete for fans. And we know everyone's inundated with wrestling they're watching on a weekly basis. There's so much to go around. Outside of just AEW and WWE being the big two, as we mentioned with Impact TNA, you got GCW, you got NWA, you got your local independents, which you should be supporting, by the way. There's so much to go around. So time is so valuable. And I think Impact, at the very least right now, has been making people aware that they're worth your time. And I think we're the biggest advocates of that. They are worth your time to come check out because they're doing it better. And while you become disenchanted with maybe AEW is not for you anymore, maybe WWE feels like it's not the same anymore, man, I walk outside of these last 2 weeks, Impact usually leaves me very satisfied where I'm like, that was worth my time. I have to say, man, like that in Bound for Glory, their pay-per-views feel like you're part of something special. And man, I hop in for the ride. I mean, they're going to go all in on this TNA rebrand, and it's going to be something fun.
Yeah, it's going to be badass. Like you said, that's part of the reason we're not super critical and not been out of shape about the last 2 weeks and the next few weeks being a little bit slow to go as we transition to the new company, because it's always so good. Otherwise, you know, I can give them a little grace here in this situation. Whereas, you know, with other promotions, you might not be so forgiving. So yeah, man, come along for the ride with us.
Yeah, and you can't burn the candle at both ends. We understand you have to like gear up and get ready for what is going to be a huge overhaul going into that first week of tapings and that first pay-per-view for TNA. And you got to get things ready. And there's got to be a sense of relief on their end that things are done for the year. You can close your books on Impact outside of that Final Resolution pay-per-view that's happening in Toronto. Things are wrapped, man. They're getting ready for total nonstop action. It's going to be here before you know it. They're going to be ringing in the new year, and they're going to ride that wave of momentum. Let's hope they can sustain it and they can continue to build around the younger talent they're signing, or maybe we'll see a new wave of young talent that, I mean, we are seeing an emergence of an amazing crop of young talent, not just here in the Northeast, but all across America, young talent that they deserve a home on a national platform. And I think we're going to see the likes of them being signed. We just saw like Leon Slater has been emphasized, but as they continue to expand and have more money at their options and they can re-sign their talent that they feature right now, it also expands to younger talent that maybe would be AXS in AEW or WWE. They have the ability to be showcased in a big way and highlight guys that deserve to be highlighted. I'm on the independents pretty much every weekend seeing these guys grind and some of the best talent ever. I mean, people will be lucky to have any of these guys that I work with on a weekly basis in an Impact Wrestling. It's only a matter of time that they're going to get the the platform they deserve, and Impact/TNA might be that platform they're eventually going to get.
100%.
So make sure you guys go to theturnbuckletavern.com for all your needs here. We have all your wrestling podcasts, everything you can want, covering all things WWE, AEW, do the debate show, wrestling news. We're dropping more content. And I have to say, Colton, man, the train keeps rolling as we see the audio drops happen pretty much every day. It's got to be, I mean, the most well-oiled machine in all of wrestling podcast history. It's hard. And add on top of that, that's not just the tavern. Add on top of that, the Pod Foundation with the Extra Cooler boys. You got the Chick Foley show coming down the aisle. Like, we have you covered. If you have a long road trip, you literally could listen to all of our voices for hours on end, and then on the way back too.
Yeah, you could drive all the way across the country, man, and stick to the Pod Foundation exclusively and still have some left. That's how much content we're giving out for free every day of the week, man. So yeah, turnbuckletavern.com. Like, follow, subscribe, leave us a review. I'm not on the debate this week. I was at Dynamite in person, their first time in Louisville, Kentucky. It was a great show, had a great time, but still check it out. Drop in on YouTube on Sunday and then audio on Monday. You can catch us, Brace for Impact, and catch audio tomorrow. And also, stay tuned for Shot of Nostalgia dropping tomorrow, Saturday night's main event with Belcaster and Ace, man. Doesn't get much better.
I appreciate the kind words, and also want to give a shout out to the Chick Foley show. Congrats on your 5-year anniversary. So they dropped their episode, Chick Foley, one of the founding members of the Pod Foundation, influential in their own right, what they do here in the tavern. And 5 years is impressive. Continue to grind out content and really do it really well. So shout out to them and what they do there. Must listen. So I can't wait to check out that 5-year anniversary show. And as you know, also the other note is we usually share the Thursday with Raw Down. They're moving back to Tuesdays. So you're going to be able to catch them on Tuesdays. We're going to be standing alone on Thursdays. Unsure where their audio is going to drop. I'd imagine they're going to drop the audio on Wednesday morning. We're still going to drop our audio on Friday. You're still going to get all that wrestling content you need, but they're going to be breaking down all the fallout of Crown Jewel that's this weekend and in the home of WWE, Saudi Arabia. So, we got, Impact is, they love Chicago and they love Toronto. We know AEW loves their Chicago. WWE loves Saudi Arabia, brother.
Hey, man, they love that money. There's a lot of it over there.
Did you see? I'm not sure if you listened to Wrestling Tonight, where we broke down the Taker and Vince McMahon thing at the Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury fight, where they're doing like the Vince McMahon is
talking about cutting the promo on Dana White and just I haven't listened to Wrestling Tonight yet, so I haven't heard your guys' breakdown of it. I'm very looking forward to hearing that. But I watched that video multiple times, and man, what a to be a fly on the wall, man, for that whole night.
Dude, Father Time is undefeated. But the other, I mean, that's really that's what you take away here. And the other thing, if you look at that, like the front row of those people, I think it was Vince, Undertaker, Eminem.
Mm-hmm.
And was it Dennis Rodman too? Like there was other celebrity. It was Tyson. It was Tyson.
Mike Tyson. Yeah.
So, I mean, Saudi Arabia shelling out all to get all the celebrities out there. But, I think like just him saying it was the home was very interesting to me, but that's a topic for another time, I guess. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it was, that was not what I expected to come out of his mouth. I'll say that, but it's also not the first time I've had that experience with Vince in an interview. So.
Well, I saw a lot of people dressing up like Vince McMahon on Halloween, or Gomez from the Addams Family. So a lot of those, because I know Addams Family's in vogue now with the Wednesday show coming out on Netflix. So shout out to, Vince McMahon costumes as Gomez Addams.
Yeah, 2 for 1.
Anyway, Colton, I know you just did some shilling for the debate coming up. I know you weren't on it, but definitely guys check out the debate on Sunday in the evening, but also on dropping on Monday on audio, get your week started. There was a teaser on the flagship today talking about I believe the guest from Ring Fanatics, I think his name is Nick, had presented an idea for who's under the devil's mask, which has me intrigued. Can't wait to check it out. Who did he say? And I think the Two Bad Chads said it was someone they didn't think of, and it definitely makes sense of someone who could be. So go and check it out and make sure you guys check it out as well. It's a nice little Easter egg for you guys to check out and figure out who's under that devil's mask. Is it Adam Cole? Is it MJF? Or is it somebody else? And as we discussed, Wrestling Tonight, Monday at 7 p.m., dropping on audio Tuesday, covering all things. This week, we're going to be covering all things Crown Jewel, everything that goes down there. Maybe Logan Paul is the new U.S. champion. Did LA Knight beat Roman Reigns for the undisputed Universal Championship? I would say no, but
you
we'll
can dream.
I know you'd be a fan of it. I'm not a huge fan of LA Knight, but I think Cody Rhodes needs to finish the story. And also, check out Shot Nostalgia. As mentioned, we are more than halfway done with Saturday night's main event. We are in 1989 at this point, cruising through. We know that the catalog ends in 1992, and then they reinvigorate it in 2008, I believe, 2006, something like that. So we're going to be covering twofold. There's an episode where we do a 1992 episode and a 2006 episode, which should be really cool to see just how different they are. And it's been a blast covering the news cycle with Dave Meltzer and covering all things Saturday night's main event for the growth of 1985 to what WWF became, and really the relationship with NBC and how influential Dick Ebersol and everything that went on there was with what became Titan Sports / World Wrestling Federation. So it's been a really, really, really fun time. I think we're going to get you back on an episode sooner than later, right?
Yeah, sometime through, I know the next 2 or 3 weeks, I've got a lot coming up. I'm in peak wedding season between, I've got a wedding this weekend, and then a weekend off and then another wedding. So once we get to Thanksgiving, I free up quite a bit.
And finally, my shilling here, make sure you guys buy tickets to Remarkable Wrestling Dream Sequence. The aforementioned Motor City Machine Guns will be in action. Hopefully Alex Shelley is healthy enough to go in that tag team championship match. Triple threat above the rest, Tristan Ty and Gabe Sky. Miracle Generation, Dustin Waller and Kylon King defending their Remarkable tag titles. And then add in Motor City Machine Guns, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin. And then add on top of that, we have Desmond Cole defending his Remarkable championship against Brett Hollister. We also have Percy Ryan, the new Riot champion, defending his title against Sammy Diaz. More matches to be announced. And of course, you guys can check out remarkablewrestling.com for future events as well. We're going to be holding an event in December, I believe December 9th, in the same building we're having Dream Sequence at in Port Jefferson, New York. And it's going to be back to the hotel. And then we also we're going on the road for the first time, Worcester, Massachusetts, the world famous White Eagle. We're going to be at Restival for Youth of the Nation. You guys can go on Remarkable Wrestling's Instagram page or email them if you want to support, because it's a free show. So that means no talent is getting paid. So if you want to support any of the independent wrestlers that are coming out from all different areas of, Northeast to get out to Worcester and support them, reach out to remarkablewrestling@gmail.com. And you can, give a little bit to support independent wrestling. Everybody is out there to be supported and sponsored. It's on Remarkable_wrestling on Instagram for more information. So make sure you guys support independent wrestling. It is the lifeblood of the future, as I mentioned before. I think that's all we got, Colton.
I think it is all we got. Sorry, I thought it was lagging there for a minute. So, but yeah,
no
man, thank everybody for joining us, man. And thanks for sticking with us. And like I said, we got a few more weeks getting into TNA, so stick with us always. Thursdays at 10:10.
Absolutely, and we will definitely talk more about the Chicago tapings. We're going to preview. We'll talk about the result of Turning Point. We'll preview what's eventually going to happen at Final Resolution in Toronto. Of course, get ready for that TNA rebrand happening in January and follow us all along the way. But until then, we'll talk to you after a while.